So, you know, I'm going to share an experience, and I normally don't do that, but I want to bring things into perspective. So, growing up, I was the lighter of my family, and uh, I always felt um, as though my family's perspective was a little different. I think being younger, there was a little bit of me that was naive, and I definitely have always been for people. I just didn't understand perspective in the way that I felt like I should. And so people in my family are darker hued. Um, uh, Specifically in this instance, I'm speaking on my grandfather. My grandfather died when he was 99, so he definitely had a broader view in terms of his perspective in history, and then respective of our life experiences that we shared. And my grandfather would always tell me that my experiences would be different. And when I say that, I mean he felt like because of my skin color, that I would be treated different in America than his experience, which I'm sure at some point plays a role. And because I'm not a darker hued person, I definitely can't acknowledge or deny that happens. But I'm open at this point to the perspective. Although back when I was younger, I would always tell I would always reply, "No, Grandpa, you know, everybody's experience is going to be different, and you know, you know, we are all people of color." But he adamantly, and not just him, but other people, a lot of other people in my family had this thought process, and now I get it. I remember my grandfather saying, grandfather had a best friend, Mr. Duckworth was his name, and he loved that guy. They went fishing and they did all this stuff together. And my grandfather would use the c word with white people, and I was like, "Hey, Grandpa, you can't use that word," you know. And life experience taught me that I would say that for years. That was like a word that my grandfather regularly used, and I felt like, you know what, I had an aha moment. Is what happened. You know, it's I had to really, really think as I got older and I was able to digest America, and I had to look at my grandfather's perspective. And shit, he was born in the 20s. Like there was definitely a different way that they learned to interact with people back then. And so there wasn't nothing in my lifetime that was going to take away that experience that he had. And I share this today because I don't fault him for having that mentality. That was a learned behavior, hundreds of years to help push that narrative in him. And he was a good man. So he did the best. His passing was the hardest that I've experienced. And so fast forward to today where we're at is I see people in my same communities, Native Americans and black people, struggling. And then you have some people within the community pointing the finger at them at their struggle. You got an administration here that could give less than a fuck, that is taking the protections that people have, targeting my communities. When you're taking these things away, that's looting. Okay, that hasn't stopped. It's It's one thing for you to consciously make a decision to go somewhere and say, you know what, I'm going to steal this. It is a completely different scenario when generations upon generations of a people steal from another people. From the language to the religion to the DNA, spanning across hundreds of years and generations upon generations of people, you inflict suffering through action or inaction. So when I see people in my community saying, you know what, I won't do that, or those people should be ashamed of themselves. No, you should be ashamed of yourself for being that ignorant that you don't understand that before this administration, before this pandemic, those people were probably starving, on the brink, or if not, homeless. Those people have probably been at the knee of some of these police officers. Some of them probably underneath the ground and can't loot. So for you to be that comfortable, privilege is something that it's a learned behavior. So that don't mean people of color can't feel it too. Privileged. And you definitely are feeling yourself and you feeling privileged if you think that you can judge these people out here without knowing. You know their situation, but without knowing their specific situation. But you can take a wild guess and wonder, did they get their $1,200 stimulus? If they living in these communities that your president would call a shithole country, or a place where I wouldn't live, I wouldn't go there, you think they getting funding? Do you think that there was already systematic prejudice against people of color in their workplace? So what are the odds that they still working? What are the odds that there's somebody in that administration that's working to help them? Beat down, over and over and over again. We as a community, you as an individual, as part of that community, cannot afford to be that fucking ignorant. If you lost your job, you got a family to feed. You need to maintain a roof over your head. And the country that binds you to all these laws that you need to comply and abide by, while they telling you, oh, you shouldn't be doing this, or you can't do this, while they continuously violate your very existence. You can't lose that perspective, because if you lose that perspective, it's like they were saying, you ain't no better than them. You got to understand this on a political level, on a human rights level. You know, it's like you paved the way as a person of color, specifically speaking to the African American community. You paved the way for this country to function the way that it does. You built this country. You made it possible for all these other people to come here and feel comfortable. So by you sitting up here saying, well, we're going to shut this door now, build a wall, and you're a Trump supporter, there's a conflict there, because you created a pathway that doesn't get dictated to for you to then change said thought process. Those people died to make this what they wanted it to be, a free country, but it's not free. So those same people can't then dictate and say, oh, well, we're going to change it now. No. We decide, because we built this. We died for this. We decide